Room 10, hup! Carry on. Military drill and ceremonies are part of every single service member's career. It starts when you get to basic, further continues when you graduate basic, and you march into formation around the parade grounds on graduation, and your family gets to see what an awesome military machine that you've become that's taken weeks to perfect. And then it follows you throughout the rest of your life, whether you decide to stay in the military or not. To your final resting place, drill and ceremonies still play a part. Now, for most military members, we're very familiar with the term drill and ceremonies, what they are, the different kinds, because it's part of our everyday life and it's part of our career. But for the average civilian, they may not be as familiar with that. So when taps is played at a ceremony, they may not know what to do. When they see 6 guys with sabers at a wedding sitting out front for the bride and groom, they may not understand why that's there. Well, I hope that you are one of those people that really do not understand why taps is played or what to do when taps is played. You may not understand things like a missing man formation or why those 6 guys with sabers are out at a wedding. And I hope to further give you a information and give you a better understanding of how those ceremonies came to be, why we still use them today, and what to do if you're around one of those ceremonies. Since most people are pretty familiar with the playing of taps, let's start with how taps came to be. Taps came to be during the American Civil War. According to a segment in the History Channel, there was a Union general that did not care for the way Lights Out was played for the bugle call. During that time, the only way of communication was through a bugle because we didn't have radio communications back then. So a bugle call would signal certain commands throughout the Army. So he issued taps to be a signal as lights out. And we still use it today. At most military installations, at around 2200 hours or 10 p.m., you can hear taps being played over the base loudspeaker, which indicates it is quiet hours. Now, it wasn't used in a military funeral honor per se as rendering military honors until later on in the Civil War, when a captain from an artillery regiment had one of his troops die. Now, at the time, to render proper military honors, you would fire 3 shots into the air, boom, 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 at certain intervals to honor the dead. However, back then, those same 3 volleys were also to signal the end of the fighting, as in, we're not going to fight anymore today. Or in the morning, saying as, we are lined up and ready to go, we're signaling to the enemy that we are ready to begin. So to alleviate confusion, instead of firing those 3 volleys, he played taps instead, which has evolved into why we still play taps today. Now, there are certain regulations that dictate to military members what you should do while taps is played. For instance, during a military funeral or during a memorial service, you must come to the position of attention and render a salute during the first note of taps all the way to the end. And if you're a civilian during the same situation, you should if you're wearing a hat, please take your hat off or head garment and place your right hand over your heart as if you were rendering Pledge of Allegiance. Now, we've talked about taps as being a way to honor fallen comrades. Let's talk about another ceremony that we use to honor fallen comrades, and that is the missing man formation. Now, the missing man formation is usually formed up in a group of 6 aircraft, and it can be done with anywhere between 4 to 6. And you're in a formation such as this, and at a predetermined point, the aircraft group commander will give a signal to one of the aircraft to climb and divert from the rest of the group. And this is to symbolize that the fallen comrade has ascended into heaven and is no longer part of the group. Now, it's seldomly used today, but it still is used through at air shows. So if you go to an air show and you hear the announcer say, "Hey, this group is going to be performing the missing man formation," now you know why it's performed. But it started back in pre-World War II. According to an article from the ruralheritagecenter.net, in 1936, King George V of England received the first recorded flypast for a non-Air Force funeral. It also became to the United States as being part of a adopted tradition in 1938 during the funeral of Major General Oscar Westover, which Westover Field is named for in Massachusetts. And that flyer was done with over 50 aircraft. Now, we've talked about a couple of different ceremonies that we've used to honor our fallen comrades. Let's talk about another ceremony that's not as somber and is a little bit more uplifting, and that's the saber arch. The saber arch is mainly used for weddings, and that is when a 6-man team such as this will form up in 2 columns of 3 and with sabers will draw as the bride and the groom are exiting the chapel after the ceremony. And as a quip, as a bit of tradition, the NCO in charge of the detail will lower his sword as the non-military member of the couple have passed and tap them on the butt. And this is to symbolize, and it's not to be rude or to be disrespectful, it's to symbolize as saying, hey, welcome to the military, because you're not just marrying that military member, you're also marrying into a lifestyle and what you're going to be surrounded in the future. So they use it mainly in weddings, but they also use it in award ceremonies. And one example is in the Air Force Senior NCO induction, where if you make the top tier rank of the enlisted structure, you will walk through an arch of military members holding sabers, and that is to show respect and as a congratulatory, as saying, congratulations, you've reached this huge accomplishment. Now that you're familiar with these few ceremonies, let's go over what we've talked about. There are many different ceremonies that are familiar to the normal military member, but not too familiar to the civilian. However, now you should know that the playing of taps is a very somber moment and should be given the proper courtesies when played. The missing man formation is not just a stunt performed by an aerial demonstration team, it's to actually honor a fallen comrade. And a saber arch is also used to honor the welcome of a bride to the military. So if you're part of these or around these ceremonies in the future, I hope you now have a better understanding of why they are performed and where they came from.